Okay, in this lesson tutorial, I'm going to examine the consequences of heart disease, and I'm going to focus specifically on the area of Possil in the northern part of Glasgow. And we're going to consider at least 6 different impacts it is having on the communities of not just Glasgow, but more specifically of this area of Possil, as well as the wider effect that this disease is having on the whole of Scotland. Okay. And before we get going looking at the different ideas and looking at the area of Possil itself, you will have already watched the Darren McGarvey video or program, which looked at Possil itself, which is the area that he was from, and has dealt with a lot of the issues and consequences of this disease that this disease is having on those communities. And that should hopefully be an image you have in your head already about what it's like to live here and what the consequence of this disease is having on those communities. And when we think about the consequence of any disease, we tend to just automatically assume that it's the number of people that die. But actually, the consequence of a disease, especially a disease that is more common in some areas than others, is much wider than the number of people that the disease kills. Because in developed countries like Scotland, diseases often don't kill, but they do incapacitate people or have an emotional or mental effect on people long after they've actually had a physical health impact. And we'll discuss some of that in today's class. Now, what's important for you to do as you watch this video, as I talk through a range of consequences, is that you use these consequences to write up a series of bullet points that explain the impact that this disease is having on Possil. And you'll be doing that in your main assignment document, which should have at least 6 different ideas. And I say at least 6 because a typical exam question would be worth 6 marks and would like you to therefore explore 6 different effects that this disease is having. So first of all, let's look at Possil, the community which we're going to be talking about, and then let's look at some of the effects. So I've got an image of Google Earth here, and it's of Glasgow. And you will see the Glasgow city centre is down here. So this is where Queen Street Station is and George Square, and that's what we might call the CBD. And if you're driving in from Crieff or from Perth, you'd be coming down the M80 motorway onto the M8. And just before you went into the city centre, if that's indeed what you were going to do, you would see Possil on your right-hand side because it's this area here. So let's have a look at this area. Now, it's one of Glasgow's poorest areas in terms of economic wealth. And it's also one of the areas where heart disease is having a significant effect. Now, the first thing I want to do is actually zoom in on Possil High Street, just to give you an indication of what this area kind of looks like. So this is the center of Possil itself, or Possil Park. And when we go in to the High Street, what you can see is lots of the old tenement houses built during the Industrial Revolution. We can see quite a lot of rundown stores. There's a Mr. Chips. There's quite a lot of fast food outlets actually on this high street, which indicates something about the diet of people. It looks fairly rundown. There looks like there's very limited investment. Lots of small independent stores selling discounted goods, which tells you something about the level of wealth in the community. It's probably quite low, because the types of stores available in an area tends to indicate a lot. Lots of health services present. That tells you something about the general health. There's a pharmacy of the community. If I just come out of this particular part and show you the kind of the typical housing, apart from having a mixture of the old tenement houses, quite a lot of Possil has got what we call social housing, or what is more commonly called council housing. So if I just go to Ellesmere Street over here, and it'll drop you in another part of Possil to show you how an awful lot of the people are living. So we've got these low-rise council flats. That's kind of a 15-story council properties, as well as these council houses here. And an awful lot of the population is either low income or unemployed. And there are a whole range of social problems, which Darren McGarvey actually talks about in his program. Okay. Let's now have a look at the actual impact? Let's answer the question. So what is the impact of heart disease in Scotland? Okay, well, the first thing, if we talk about POSL itself, and here's POSL right up here. The first impact is it's causing a very high death rate for the population, or premature death rate. So what we can see here is we've got over 120 deaths per 1,000 for the under 75s in the area of POSL. Okay, so that would be the first impact. That's a straightforward impact. It's killing much higher numbers of people per 100,000, over 120, than, for example, in East Renfrewshire, one of the wealthiest areas of Glasgow, where it's only killing roughly 80 people per 100,000. So a significantly higher death rate in this area. So that's consequence number one. You're going to want to talk about that consequence. Well, let's have a little look at two linked consequences. Okay. So the first one is, because there are so many people being affected by it, it's costing the NHS in Scotland £800 million a year in extra healthcare costs. Now, this isn't because people are dying. These are the costs that come from having to treat people who are suffering with it, who have been debilitated by it. Okay, those are costs that can often then go on for the rest of their lives, because if you have a heart attack or a stroke associated with heart disease, you often never fully recover, and therefore there is costs in medicines, increased medicines for the rest of your life. I've actually got a bar graph over here that talks about prescription costs rising in Scotland continually because of this burden of healthcare. So your second impact is the huge financial cost on the healthcare system in Scotland to provide healthcare to those that have suffered from heart disease. Okay. The third consequence is actually the overall impact it has on our entire economy. Okay, £1.8 billion a year is lost in possible income. So why is this? Well, the main problem with heart disease is when it does impact on you, you are no longer able to work, or you are only able to work at a less productive level than you were prior to being affected by the disease. So what that means is that you are no longer generating income, you're no longer working, or you're not as productive as you were, which means that you're generating a lot less tax. So not only are you costing more in healthcare costs, that's the 800 million, but you're now no longer likely to be contributing as much in the wealth that you create. So there is a loss into our economic activity caused by a decline in the amount of people able to work or work as productive as they were before because of heart disease. So that's three impacts we've looked at so far. Let's have a little look at a little bit more. Okay, so here is our next thing. This is called multimorbidity. Okay, and this is to do with long-term health conditions that people suffer from that are linked to heart disease. Because when you suffer from heart disease, you start to be able to do a lot less than you possibly were doing prior, for example, exercise, which then starts to trigger lots of other health-related issues that aren't actually as a consequence of heart disease, but they're due to possibly to a lack of exercise. So what then happens is there's an further increase in healthcare costs treating other illnesses that you suffer from that you wouldn't have suffered from if you didn't have heart disease in the first place. Okay? So how do you explain that? That's just talking about the additional healthcare costs from other healthcare conditions that people start to suffer from once they've had or are suffering from heart disease or had a heart attack, and that triggers other healthcare issues. So these are healthcare issues that don't actually register as heart disease related, but actually they wouldn't have existed had the person not been suffering from heart disease. Okay, right, next one. Now this is one of the great tragedies of heart disease, and there's two ideas here. The first one is the person who is affected by it. And we've got the emotion, I've got some data from Scotland on the emotional effects of having a heart condition. 77% of people suffer from increased levels of anxiousness if they have a heart condition, which obviously is not a good thing, because increased stress is one of the things that actually causes or worsens heart problems. 51% of people suffer from some kind of level of depression. 47 are scared. So you get the idea that 13% struggle to socialize when they start to suffer from heart conditions. So there is an emotional effect on human beings that are suffering from some kind of heart condition. And this has an impact on their mental health. Now, at this point, you can develop this into a whole new idea, because if it's having an impact on mental health of the population, if so many people are suffering from it, then that requires us to provide more mental health care services to treat people who are being harmed in some way, whose mental health is being harmed in some way. And it's not just more psychiatrists who have to treat people, it's potential hospitalizations with people who are struggling and need care. And it's also increased medication for people that need to take some kind of antidepressants or medicines to help deal with their mental health. So what we have now is an increased cost, not just on problems to do with the physical health of the heart itself, but actually increased costs now that we're having to also deal with an increase in mental health related issues. So that's another impact that it's having. And this is especially true in POSL. Okay. And there is one additional point, so this is another point you can make, or another bullet point on top of the one I've just made. There is also an impact on the community around the person who is being affected. So when an individual is affected by any disease or any illness, it's not just the individual that is harmed and may suffer and struggle. It's actually their family and the people that are associated with them. Because disease tends to impact on a much wider community around people. We all feel worried when somebody that we know and love is unwell. So there is a much wider emotional impact on families and communities where there are lots of people suffering from this particular illness. And that can have a long-term effect on people, on people's mental health if they know of somebody who is being affected by a heart condition. So I just gave you 3 issues all linked to this issue of mental health. I talked first of all about the issue of the individual being more likely to feel unwell and being anxious. I then linked that to the fact that there's more healthcare costs from treating the person because they've now got a mental health issue, not just a physical health problem. And then I talked about the wider effect on families and the communities who are living with people and having to look after people who have this condition, who are themselves then affected. Okay. Now there is the actual loss of years. I've got this really interesting statistic. So it's estimated that Scotland loses 2,500 years of life for every 100,000 people in our population because they die before their average life expectancy. Okay? So what this means is that amount of life is being lost. People are dying prematurely. So if you think about the average life expectancy in the UK as being about 82 at the moment, and every person that dies before that average life, that's lost years of potential life. Okay, and you can see on this little league table that whilst we are by no means the worst in terms of lost years of life, we can see Bulgaria is the worst of over 7,000. We are worse than an awful lot of other areas, including the other regions of the United Kingdom. So there's England, and there's Wales just behind us, and there's Northern Ireland. So we are the worst of the 4 main regions in terms of loss of years of life. And that is people not being able to do all the things they would have done with having a full and healthy and happy life, because they die prematurely. Okay, so there you have a full range of impacts that heart disease is having on our society, on our health, on our communities, and all of this needs to be done written up for POSL. So I just have a little look at what you would do here. So the first thing you want to do is you want to write your case study as POSL, Glasgow. I'll write POSL Park, I'll give it its full name. And then you want to put each of these points as a bullet point. Okay, so Haskell should be set up like that. And you now need to write in as much detail as you can, at least 6, and I would encourage you to do more because I talk about more consequences of heart disease.